Alright, so let's talk a little bit about modals of advice. The first modal of advice I want to talk about is should, and then conversely should not or shouldn't. So you use should to ask for advice. You might ask, should I get another tattoo? Should I pick up donuts on the way home from work? And you can use should and should not also to give advice. You shouldn't stay up so late. You shouldn't copy your friend's homework. Make sense? Further, there's also ought to. Now, you can use ought to give advice, such as you ought to eat healthier so you don't get sick. However, there is no negative usage of ought to in American English. That is to say, you would never use ought to in the context of you ought to not or you ought not to. You'll have to forgive that sound. My husband is mowing the grass. I think he's going away now. Fabulous. Anyway, so ought to. You would never use it in the context of you ought not to do that. You ought to not do that. You never do that in American English, but you can use it to give advice, just as ought to. Now, when you say ought to, very often it comes out as oughta, like you ought to eat healthier so you don't get sick. You ought to study for your test so that way you get a good grade. All right. The last one I want to bring to your attention today is had better or had better not. So you use had better or had better not to give strong advice, but it also sounds less formal. So you'd better hurry, you're going to be late. You had better hurry, you're going to be late. You'd better not eat all the pizza before I get home. You had better not eat all the pizza before I get home. So I'd like you to review these modals of advice. Look at the activity on page 42 of your textbook.